Good morning. If you could make your way to your seats, that would be fantastic. This is your 30-second warning. 30-second warning. Well, welcome back. My name is Brent Russett. I pastor Asbury Free Methodist Church in beautiful Perth, Ontario. And it's great to be here today. I think some of you know, but let me remind you that there is a prayer room, and the prayer room is open all the time. If you want prayer, need prayer, then I would encourage you to avail yourself of that room. There is a prayer meeting that happens at 7 a.m. in the morning. So for you early risers, come grab a quick breakfast and then take part of the prayer meeting at 7 a.m. And you're signed up to pray too, so check out when you are supposed to be praying as well. Well, we want to thank our sponsors, the 4 C's, for sponsoring all of tomorrow afternoon workshops. And so here is a short video from the 4 C's.
Hello, I'm Gil Langerak from the Canadian Centre for Christian Charities. I've been a part of the 4 C's member support team for many years, actually 26 now, and have had the privilege of speaking with several of you over the years at conferences or on the phone at 4 C's when you call our office with your charity-related questions. I'd like to take just a minute of your time to share about 4 C's partnership with your denomination. First, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Sandy Crozier. Hi, Sandy, for your dedication to promoting 4 C's membership within the denomination and for your past service on the 4 C's Board of Directors. And to Bishop Cliff Fletcher, as you conclude your term, we're profoundly grateful for your leadership and endorsement. As part of the 4 C's member support team, a group of ministry professionals that serve all of our members with phone and email guidance, I have the privilege of assisting church and ministry leaders with financial administration, HR, governance policies, and more. Our team is here to support you, offering professional guidance and personalized solutions to help your ministry through complex scenarios. Our goal is that 4 C's members would operate their ministries in an exemplary, healthy, and effective way. We recently recorded a series of webinars on the clergy residence deduction and created a supporting resource document. These are just a few examples of the valuable tools and insights we provide. We really hope your church will become a 4 C's member this year. Thank you, Sandy and Bishop Fletcher, for your exceptional support, and thank you to all church leaders for your dedication and service. We're grateful to be able to support this conference and your ministries throughout the year. God bless.
So we're going to try the the opportunity here again to invite IET to come forward, Intercultural Engagement Team, Adam and Paula and Superintendent Ahmed. And we would just like to be able to present a small gift to our brother Ahmed at this time.
As Superintendent makes his way up here, we have a couple of gifts on behalf of our family of faith and IET, ICCM. When Bishop and myself and Pastor Paul last year, when we had the opportunity to visit with our Free Methodist family in Ghana, they were so generous to gift all of us, we don't have a picture to show you the evidence, but traditional Ghanaian smocks that Pastor Paul proudly danced with. And I tried to follow him. Yes, very talented. I have the evidence if you would like to see it. But beautiful traditional Ghanaian smocks. So when we thought about giving gifts to Superintendent, I thought, what's the closest thing to a traditional Canadian smock?
Thank you.
Bless you, brother.
Thank you.
I think that would look great on Superintendent Ahmed, don't you think so? He is one of us, right? Of course, I have been to Ghana 3 times, and I have enjoyed my time there. And of course, as most of you know, we are honored guests when we're in other parts of the world. And so this is just a little gift from us, just to say thank you for coming. And thank you for being a part of our General Conference, and it is always so good to have you here. And it is better to be in your country, I will admit, friends, because it's so much warmer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Amen. Yeah, so this is a traditional Canadian smock, right? That's good. I like it. Yeah. Well, when we thought of coming and got the opportunity to come, we were also still thinking about what do we present in conference and also to appreciate the church in Canada. And I remember I was talking to Sister Paula, and I said, oh, can you give me these names? He said, oh, you don't need to do anything. I said, well, in Ghana we have a saying. The housefly says, I might not have anything, but I rub my hands. And to it, our situation, whether poor or challenge, should never take away our sense of gratitude and appreciation. So the church said, no, we must still bring something. And we began with our dear sister Vinola. She's the one we've been disturbing all. Now to our bishop. I know Bishop. How many of you know Bishop is a footballer? He's a soccer player. Good. So we thought of giving him something, but this time not just the bishop alone, with a wife, so that they can play together. So we have this gift for the bishop. Fletchers. And this is for your wife. That is not all. We talk about the partnership between Ghana and Canada. So we kind of had this kente straps, and it is well respected in Ghana. And we give this as royalty. That even though you are going, we will continue to remember all the great things you've done for Ghana. So here we go. Not only that, we believe in appreciating and showing gratitude no matter our situation. So this was prepared by the church in Ghana for you and your wife. We believe you do not do this work alone, you did it with your wife. So this is also for you and your wife. We also want to call on our dear sister, Jane, Pastor Jane. Yeah, the Barry Church has been a long time partner of the Free Methodist Church in Ghana. In fact, we will say they nurtured us. And the church says we should give this to you in appreciation. Thank you. In conclusion, we have our report. And that one to give it to the bishop as our report. Thank you. Now in Ghana, we welcome our new leaders with these same Kente stripes. And we want to call on the bishop-elect so we can give you this to welcome you and remind you of the partnership between Ghana and Canada. Thank you.
What an honor. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, so this is for Greg.
I will take it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Those are the fun moments that we get to enjoy together as a group, and those are pretty special. Appreciate them. So we're going to move on the agenda, heading toward, I mentioned a little bit earlier, that we have 2 active task forces. I'm going to do that in a moment. We'll start with our Racial Justice, Ethnic Equity Task Force report. But just before we do that, I do have the results from the election we did this morning from the nominating committee ballot that was previously processed earlier this morning. So the results are as follows, that there were 210 votes total cast, and we received well over the 50% plus one required to achieve a majority to elect all nominations, the slate of nominations that were there. And so each of those candidates that you saw on the list have been elected to their positions, and so we congratulate them and thank you for that participation. Yes. So I'm going to give this back to John for safekeeping, and then I will do my introductory moments for the task force. And I know what you're thinking. Uh-oh, there's the guy with the clicker again. I understand we have technical things sorted out, but we're going to start with my introductory. The BOA report for the task force. There we are. Okay, thank you. So it's my privilege to be able to introduce this task force and to talk about how this came together very briefly, and then we'll ask some members from the team to come on up and you'll hear from them. So this particular task force has completed its work and has submitted its final report to the BOA. And when the BOA was thinking about and talking about commissioning such a task force, we wanted this task force to help us all to gain a better understanding of the views and experiences of Black and Indigenous and people of color, other people of color across our denomination. And they were to find ways to help us to assess the perceptions, the practices, and the potential barriers that might exist against our achieving and appreciating a real diversity of race and ethnicity across the denomination. And then we asked them to submit remedial recommendations to the BOA when they examined those parameters and those data and came to some conclusions to give to us some recommendations. So we understood that this was a colossal undertaking. This was a big task. We appreciate the seriousness with which they addressed this work, and we have appreciated the rigor and the thoroughness of the work. So in the reports that you will have received, there is a task force report from the BOA that contains much of the final report from this task force. So you can see many of the details there. You can see that it is thorough and has been well worked. And you can go to their website, of course, to get the full explanation. I'm sure we'll hear that more from the team themselves. In the end, they brought 10 recommendations to the BOA for our consideration. We worked through each one of them, and in the end, we accepted all of them, at least in principle. And so we're going to hear more on that from this group itself. And because this task force has not previously had a public communication venue like this within the FMCIC, we're going to give them a fair chunk of time. And so when they're going to come up and explain to you some of their work, and then I'll just finish off very briefly at the end with some of our steps forward as BOA in response to this task force work. So Darren and his team will have you guys come on up.
Good morning. It's great to be with you. And yes, it is our first formal presentation from the RG Task Force. We don't try and pronounce that mouthful every time. The Racial Justice and Ethnic Equity Task Force. If your mouth is dry, you'll have trouble. But I'd like to introduce our panel as we get started this morning. I hope that also you've had a chance to log in, download Kahoot, and the number and the login will be on the screen very shortly, okay? The far side, we have David Wright from Bramalea Free Methodist Church. Wave, hi, David. And David's part of the history subcommittee of our task force. Beside him is Reverend Sabrina Hines, who is associate pastor at Kingsview. Yay! And she has been a part of the task force as well, part of the congregational study sub-team. Lindsay Noel is from Quebec and the Quebec subcommittee of our task force. And many of you know Lindsay. Many of you may not know her level of education. She brought an incredible amount of resources to our task force, and we're thankful. You're about to meet online on a video Reverend Keitha Ogbogu, who is the lead pastor in Calgary at West Springs, who is coming to us again by video this morning as she's not able to make it. But we're going to begin with an introduction from our co-chair, Reverend Keitha Ogbogu, and we'll see that on the screen. If you haven't joined Kahoot, I'm sorry, you've missed your opportunity. You can still play along manually, okay, and see how you did. Here we go. Go to the next slide, please, and we'll start the video.
Hello, Free Methodist family. My name is Keitha Ogbogu, and I'm an ordained minister here in Calgary, Alberta, at West Springs Church. Calgary is the home of the Flames, the Stampede, and the only place pancakes are celebrated for an entire week. This morning, I get to share with you on behalf of the Racial Justice and Ethnic Equity Task Force. So why consider racial justice and ethnic equity within the Free Methodist Church in Canada? Doesn't the simple act of conversation about racism and inequality simply breed a victim mentality? After all, isn't it obvious that it is diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that have kept your son, your daughter, your neighbor from good-paying jobs? Those people get all the advantages. If they want to be a part of us, tell them to assimilate. And all of this is just liberal, woke politics. All of it just leads to socialism. Besides, I don't see color, so why can't they just get over it? These are some of the unfortunate sentiments that surround conversations that address racial and ethnic inequities. They can be found on social media posts, in memes, within ideological rhetoric, media outlets, within political discourse, neighborly conversations, and even within the church. Perhaps even with and among some of us. Unfortunately, these notions dismiss the experiences of BIPOC persons in Canada who routinely face microaggressions, discrimination, and exclusion due to bias and stereotypes. And of course, we know that bias and stereotypes face people for different reasons. But today, and in this report, we focus on the ways bias and stereotypes have affected individuals who are racialized and or are from a different ethnic background. We often think about racism as the overt actions of violent language or behavior that is directed to a person based on the color of their skin or because of their ethnic background. All things that unfortunately are still a reality today. Think about the Holocaust internment camps that isolated Japanese immigrants, lynchings of Black men in the far South, members of the Proud Boys or the KKK. Often it is these extreme actions or extreme supporters of white supremacy that we hearken back to when we think about racist behavior. But these are not the persistent forms of racial and ethnic bias and discrimination that BIPOC people experience on a day-to-day basis. It can be the small things. A Black adolescent hanging out with friends. As they walk home, neighbors call the police. They are suspicious. When the police arrive, they bring the young Black teen into the station and tell their white peers to go home and make better choices. A young Black boy meeting with a guidance counselor regarding options for university. When he demonstrates interest in pursuing law, the guidance counselor frowns and insists he should pursue the role of a legal assistant. After all, it makes decent money and you don't have to go through university. An Indigenous man is sick and arrives in the emergency room. He's ignored and overlooked and dismissed as one of those, until they discover his daughter is a surgeon in the same hospital. A Chinese woman huddles into the crowded bus shelter. One by one, the other waiting customers head into the cold. Whispers of COVID creator reach her ears. Does she walk? Does she wait? Does she confront? The bus comes. She chooses to wait for the next one. These are stories from everyday people who call Canada home and have come face to face with subtle forms of racial and ethnic bias that use both verbal and nonverbal means to other someone based on their melanin, their accent, where they were born, or their ethnicity. These microaggressions are difficult to address and correct because it isn't overtly violent actions or language that are used to dismiss, belittle, or degrade. Rather, it is hard to report, to point out, and to correct without someone assuming that you're leaning into victimhood, making a big deal out of nothing, or just trying to play the race card. But every person of color in this room has most likely had an experience where bias and discrimination have left them feeling like an outsider, like someone who doesn't quite belong, or are left wondering if they didn't get the job or the promotion or the opportunity simply because of skin color, country of origin, or ethnic background. Can the church offer a better way forward, a new perspective, something reminiscent of on earth as it is in heaven? But racism comes in another form as well. And this is where most people give up on their attempts to be anti-racist and resist the experiences and realities of BIPOC persons around the world. And this is when racism is embedded into a system. Some obvious examples of this can be found in the story of Africville, Nova Scotia, where people unfairly lost property, community, and money due to the implementation of unfair bylaws, or the long-standing inequities in access to clean water within Canada, as political party after political party make promises they refuse to keep. But then there is the disproportionate amount of Indigenous and Black individuals within our prisons, the inequitable treatment that Black and Indigenous people face within the healthcare system, the discrepancy in numbers between Black and Black youth wanting to complete post-secondary education versus the number of Black youth who do, the underrepresentation of BIPOC board members, CEOs, and senior leaders, and the list goes on and on. Systemic racism is the reason for DEI initiatives, universities that hold spaces for Indigenous and other diverse persons, why some boards choose to seek out diversity minimums, why people seek out lawyers who hold similar ethnic backgrounds as them, etc., etc. And I get it. It all sounds made up, unless you have lived it, unless you have walked with those who have. So will the church walk with those who have experienced racial disparities? Will the church listen to the voices of those who find themselves in marginalized corners? Will the church respond with defensiveness and dismissiveness, or with radical love that looks and sounds like Jesus? The Racial Justice and Ethnic Equity Task Force hope that the answer for those of us who are part of the Free Methodist Church in Canada will say yes. Yes, we will listen to BIPOC voices as they share their experience. Yes, we will create space for experiences that are different than our own. Yes, we will seek to broaden our tables, our pews, our fellowship halls, and our congregations, not so we can check off a box, reach a target, or have a more diverse picture on our websites. Instead, we do this work because it is holy. Because all of us, each and every one of us, are created in the image of God. A read through the book of Acts and the early letters to the churches confirms both the ease with which bias shows up and also the ways the church is called to respond. When the Greek widows complained that they were being treated as second-class citizens in comparison to the Hebrew widows, the response was not a roll of the eyes, a pity-filled reminder that once you reach heaven, justice is yours, or a just deal with it mentality. Instead, a team was created to oversee the work in order to ensure greater equity. When the Spirit descended on the first followers with fire and wind, the church is birthed as a global movement. The story of Jesus is uttered in languages from around the world. Asians, Cretans, Africans, and those from the Middle East are noted as hearing the good news in their own language. When the reading of the law stood in the way of Gentiles experiencing full inclusion and welcome within the church, God shows up and reveals to Peter that what he once considered unclean, what his ancestors had believed and passed down from the mouth of Moses to his very own ears, was no competitor for this new revelation that God had revealed. Do not call unclean what I have made clean. When the Jewish and Gentile Christians struggled to accept one another and each sensed a level of supremacy over the other, Paul reminds this early church that they are to be a new kind of family, one centered on Jesus. This centering of the Christ allowed Greek followers to be Greek, Roman followers to be Roman, and Jewish followers to be Jewish. And when Peter struggles to be an ally to those who are different from him, Paul calls him out and reminds him that where God is concerned, it's not about Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female. God doesn't play favorites. Where the creation is concerned, all are made in the image of God. The pathway of Scripture that points us towards participating in a more just and more equitable world can be traced throughout the Old and New Testament, where humanity is reminded time and time again that piety, rules, and tradition are not what God is after. Instead, it is their hearts. And the way you truly demonstrate love for God is found in the way that you love your neighbor. So who are our neighbors? Our neighbors speak multiple languages. They have accents. They wear religious or ethnic clothing that makes them distinct. They range in cultural and ethnic backgrounds, and their melanin is as varied as our DNA. Their cultures and heritage have gifts to teach us. Their ideals and values have something for us to learn. Our neighbors are indigenous to Canada, fourth or fifth generation Europeans who settled here. Our neighbors are Ghanaian and Kenyan, Ethiopian and Congolese. Our neighbors are Sri Lankan, Jamaican, Fijian, Filipino, Chinese, Haitian, Japanese, Ukrainian, Hungarian, Polish, Korean, and so much more. Some are new immigrants. Some have been a part of your town some of them have been a part of your neighborhood for generations, and some have just relocated from diverse multicultural cities to small towns with very few people who look like them or speak their language of origin. Some are well-educated, holding multiple degrees. Some have left war-torn countries and seek to make a new home. Others have grown up just down the street. Our neighbors are from around the world. And together, regardless of our collective history, injustices that are received or offered, and inequity we experienced and at times participated in, our neighbors, both those who have been in Canada for generations and those who are arriving today, seek to make a home here on the streets that surround our churches, in the neighborhoods where you work, in the communities where your congregants live. So we, the Free Methodist Church in Canada, are given this beautiful opportunity to engage, to listen, to learn, and to understand. Those whose stories and backgrounds are not like yours, like mine, or even like ours. The Racial Justice and Ethnic Equity Task Force hopes that the words that we wrote, the stories that we told, and the data collected will point our collective movement towards understanding our demographics, providing and participating in intercultural education, developing roots of advocacy for those who encounter injustice, that we will seek to mitigate barriers to belonging, that we will prepare ourselves for a future of diverse congregational leaders, and that this conversation that we took hold of as passed down from our predecessors will continue. We want that conversation to continue so we, and I mean all of us, might be more free to follow Jesus together, from Jerusalem to Samaria and beyond. This report houses our stories, the stories of the Free Methodist Church in Canada. This is all about who we have been, who we are, and who we hope to become. And I'm so grateful for your participation and the ways that we were able to share our stories together. Now, with God as our helper, we move forward together. Why consider racial justice and ethnic equity? Because it is holy work, and that work is ours. From Mission, BC to Edmonton, Alberta, Weyburn, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, Manitoba, all the way to Thunder Bay and Kingston, Ontario, all the way to Montreal, Quebec, and beyond. If we want to be known as ones who take responsibility for our communities, who seek for our neighbors to experience the vast welcome and love of God, and who seek to participate in the renewal of all things, then this holy work of justice is for you, and it's for me, it's for the church, it's for us all. In Luke chapter 4, we see Jesus open the scroll and read these words from Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. As ones who seek to follow, as ones who seek to be like Christ, may we go and do likewise. Amen.
thank you, Pastor Keitha. So glad Keitha sends her regrets. She was not able to be here this weekend, in part because of a family funeral. So we can keep her in our hearts and prayers as well. You know, it can be a heavy topic, so thank you for listening intently. We thought that Kahoot would help us, and I see that over 30 of you have joined us. That's lovely. And if you haven't had a chance to play Kahoot before, you're in for a treat. It's great, pastors, as an engaging tool when you're preaching, but also as a professor. Yes, fantastic. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just a pastor. Okay, but Lindsay and I have this great connection. What a great name you have, Lindsay. I know. Yeah. It is an amazing name. And so we thought we would start just warming you up on Kahoot with a question about Lindsay.
The Lindsays.
Yeah. So Lisa, we go to next slide, please. Here's your question. Is true or false? Is the name Lindsay Scottish, Haitian, or something else? What do you think? What do you think?
I don't know. This is a hard one.
But
I'm not sure.
regardless of its origin, it means grace, beauty, and strength. And I embody very little of those qualities. But 49 of you said Scottish. It is true that the origin of the name is actually even older than the Scottish clan system. It's Anglo-Saxon in origin. But the beautiful thing about the name Lindsay is that actually it's become popular. It's been adopted and translated into many cultures and languages. And the origin of Lindsay is the island of lime trees.
Yeah.
And we both like
We both.
limes.
Yes.
So it's good. It's good.
And by the way, there's 5 people that did answer Methodist.
Yes.
So I have to mention that.
So you don't have to identify yourself now, but we'd like to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you. All right. As we begin this discussion on identity, let's us dig into our report. I know everyone here has read our report, like our 90-something pages. I know it's your bedtime reading, so we're just going to dive into it a little bit. So when delving into one's personal identity, it is crucial to acknowledge and examine factors such as ethnicity, age, language, family and faith background, level experience, education, socioeconomic status, and gender. And now this is the question for my Kahoot friends. And if you don't have Kahoot, you can still answer the question. So do we have it on? So it's a true or false, so not really hard. The following factors influence the way we interact, navigate, and communicate within our relationship. So true or false? Oh, I heard someone say true. I did read it already. So there's numerous elements that can greatly influence and mold our sense of self. So I already read it, but I'm going to read it again. When delving into one's personal identity, it is crucial to acknowledge and examine factors such as, again, ethnicity, age, language, family and faith background, status, and 85% said true. I wish we had time to kind of know the thinking reflection behind your answers, but yes, the answer is true. My friends that said false, but still good, still good. So here are some of the answers we have crafted for you within our reflections. So if you haven't read our report, this is kind of the reflection behind it. According to the biblical passage of Genesis 1, verses 27, it is believed God has created humanity in his own image. As human beings, we are complex and multifaceted, coming from various locations on this earth and possessing diverse characteristics such as skin color, personalities, languages, backgrounds, and such and such. However, when we come to know the Lord, we each become a unique individual with our own distinct journey behind us and an equally unique journey ahead of us. The transformative journey of sanctification, which is under the constant guidance and influence of the Holy Spirit, is a highly individualized experience that varies for each person. The Spirit works within each individual, taking into account their unique combination of factors to shape them into the likeness of Christ. This process does not lead to mere replicas or clones of Christ, as each person retains their own distinct identity and free will. There are many factors that play a role in shaping a person's faith identity, such as the one mentioned earlier in this discussion and in Kahoot. All these elements work together to mold and influence a person's belief and spiritual journey. Despite the fact that all Christian believers share a common Savior, it is not uncommon for some to struggle with loving and valuing those who may seem different from themselves. Though we cannot ignore physical differences, we must recognize that God's love extends to all cultures and individuals, even sacrificing his life for them. Studies shows that we often support ideas that view others as inferior to us. Sadly, some Christians once believed that people with darker skin tones were not worthy of equal treatments and rights. In what ways has this had an impact on the dynamics and connections within Christian communities and relationships? So let us discuss a little bit more. As recently as 2020, the NFL League was confronted with a demand to cease their race-based brain testing, which was created under the assumption that the brain within a Black body would inherently have lower scores for cognitive functions compared to a brain within a white body. In fact, the Black player had to suffer worse harm to qualify for compensation, while whites qualified for compensation with less demonstrated injuries. It wasn't until 2021 that this controversial practice in the NFL was finally put to an end due to a costly lawsuit that brought to attention this unethical nature. The controversial practice of race-based science has been connected to the development and perpetuation of culture-bound syndromes and unethical ideologies of eugenics. Despite being disproved, the consequences of these scientific ideas persist. It is crucial that we recognize and acknowledge that diversity exists in languages, skin tones, hair type, religion, and other aspects of identity, and that this diversity does not in any way determine one's intelligence or capability. We aim to recognize and celebrate the diverse background within the FMCIC community, rooted in biblical principle. So, in order to achieve our goal, we have put forth 2 recommendations that are closely interconnected. And don't worry, I'm not going to read all the recommendations. There's a few of them, but you can refer to recommendation number 2, which is basically to conduct further research on how the Methodist Church interact with BIPOC communities historically. And recommendation number 10, to have Scott curate a list of resources that examines the concept of the Imago Dei, image of God, image de Dieu, from an RGEE lens. And something that we want you to go with is Souvenez-vous toujours du Québec. Always remember Quebec. Thank you. So I hope you're okay that it's still me. I'm continuing. Can I have a tissue, please? Little bit of emotion sometimes. But I'm grateful for God to allowing us to be here and present like almost 4 years of research, but also to mention that this is life experiences. It is not words. It is not like a report. Yes, it is a report that you've read, but this is really our lives. This is really personal, like Darren mentioned. So sometimes it can be emotional to address these things, but I am grateful that everyone here has those beautiful smiles and are really open to receive what we're doing today, even that we're using Kahoot. So thank you. You can applaud yourself to participate with us today. So the next question is a yes or no for a Kahoot friend, but also if you don't have Kahoot, you can still play. Yes. So, do you recognize this song? Yeah. Did you recognize the language? That's a bonus question. No? Creole! Yes, Luke, all right. Okay, so let's go to the real question. So it's a yes or no. So what is your own response to the question below? Reflect for a moment and think. Have you considered how your own biases and assumptions influence your interactions with people who speak a different language than you? Have you ever, Darren? No? Yeah? What about you, Sabrina? David? Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, okay. Like a mixed batch of answers. I like that. I like that. Diversity again. All right. 94% said yes. Okay. And yeah, 2% interesting. No need. I don't have biases or make assumptions. I love confidence in that. They can come to talk to me after, yeah. But I love it. And yeah, 3% said no, never thought about it. All right, great. So here are some answers, again, for you from our team. We addressed this again in our lengthy report. If you're interested, it's about page 22. Our observations have revealed that language differences, particularly with accents and shared experience, may hinder relationship development. Instead of showing appreciation for the linguistic ability of bilingual or multilingual immigrants, some congregants may display condescending behaviors towards them due to their thick accent. So I guess sometimes you can hear my French accent behind my English, but it's beautiful for me. That's how I see it. One of the leaders who provided their opinion on this matter expressed their concern, stating, and this is verbatim from one of the congregants, "In my experience, I have witnessed instances where certain individual has been disrespected, particularly if they still have a thick accent. And you can see where they're doing translation work in their head. There have been tendencies to treat someone who kind of struggles with that process a bit as not as intelligent. It is fascinating to observe a phenomenon that showcases a feeling of superiority in the English language among certain individuals who speak it as their native tongue. In the following scenario, an English-speaking Anglophone and a French-speaking Francophone engage in a conversation. Although the Francophone is fluid, might I say, fluid in English, their native language is still heavily influenced in their native tongue. We can see it in their speech. It's resulting in a strong accent. Instead of requesting the Francophone to speak at a lower pace to understand their accent, the Anglophone whose grasp of the French language is limited opts to speak in a less than stellar manner in French. It seems to be the general assumption that poor understanding of French is more desirable than speaking English with an accent, even if the latter is fluent. So to what extent do Canadians tend to form opinions or make judgments about individuals based on their regional or foreign accent? Some experts have delved into these questions. According to some studies, even infants prefer speakers with a regional accent, suggesting this bias originates from a young age. Prof. Ken Lee research shows that children bias against accents decreases with diverse interaction. While it may be challenging to identify with these particular scenarios, practicing bias exercises can help us recognize our own biases and how we view individuals who speak a different native language or have a distinct accent from our own. Unfortunately, people with accents often face numerous challenges in different situations due to the language barriers and cultural differences. It is crucial to acknowledge and recognize the exceptional skill level, intelligence, and capacity of individuals who can fluently speak multiple languages. Their ability to do this effortlessly switch between languages is truly remarkable and should be greatly appreciated. And in this, I'm going to plug my friend, workshop in that. So to reflect on these bias exercise, I think you're going to go further into that in your workshop. So I think of that person that did answer, no, I don't have biases, or people make assumptions. This is a great workshop to go through, yeah. So therefore, we have proposed this recommendation. Recommendation number 8 is to always consider doing translation, like French and English or national languages, to make sure that the translation is on par, that it is made as the best that it can be in both language, both English and French. And as we develop the church in Canada and we have diverse languages in our denomination, eventually we can translate in other languages. Thank you for the time you have allowed me. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for everyone that has been transparent by playing Kahoot with my 2 questions. And always remember Quebec. Souvenez-vous toujours du Québec. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I must say I love your French accent. And I also am thankful for your educational strivings, and I look up to you. Thank you also for your participation, weighing in with your responses. I have one question for you, and the question is, must individual or cultural values be either right or wrong? This is a poll. Must individual or cultural values be either correct or wrong? Yes. Do you like coffee or do you like tea? Some people might think one is morally not good. Or one is superior to the other? Yes. I think I have a vote with Garth. Yes. So we have a large percent, 73 saying no, and 9 not sure, and 3, 3 yes. Well, let's unpack this a little bit. I want to give us some fodder for thought. Nam Chen Chang, a church planter, pastor, teacher, and leader in Malaysia, is quoted in the book Cultural Insights for Christian Leaders by Douglas McConnell. Chan wrote, and I quote, "An organization may espouse diversity, but assumed norms, values, and practices shaped by the dominant ethnic group can turn away other groups. This dominant group may not even be a majority, but they determine the cultural ethos through a combination of factors that also include historical precedents, education, and socioeconomic status. Instead of enrichment through hybridization with new cultures, the organization pressures assimilation into unessential norms assumed by the dominant group," end quote. In your environment, in your pastorate, in your circles, what unessential values have become established norms that turn others away? Are others who do things differently judged negatively based on behaviors and values that are not necessarily sinful? The author McConnell discusses the work of Berkeley sociologist Claude Fisher and quotes him this way: "People tend to associate with people like themselves. In that sense, networks are inbred," end quote. We develop subcultures of those like us that limit our connectedness with others that are not like us. Hence, these subcultures separate and divide us. We detach and isolate ourselves from other peoples and languages that God is calling us to be discipled alongside. Another question for you. Are there subcultures in your local church or organization? Are they pulling the members apart? Here is a video where one of our local pastors talks about navigating competing values. A video by Dustin.
Hello, General Conference. I'm Pastor Dustin Schellenberg here in Winnipeg, Manitoba at Crestview Park Free Methodist Church in Treaty 1 territory. And the Racial Justice and Ethnic Equity Task Force asked me to share a little bit of information about my church and our experience out here over the last 10 years and some of the things we've learned because our church here in Winnipeg is maybe looks a little bit different than many other churches in our neighborhood or even in our movement. In that it is predominantly Black. Most people who attend our church are from either Ghana or the West Indies. And there's a few smatterings of us white folk around, but I like to joke that I was the diversity hire because the church was struggling to relate to Canadians. Their neighbors found it a difficult church to attend to because they did things really differently and sometimes in ways that were unpredictable and uncomfortable. So that's one of the reasons why I was hired. And no difference has been more challenging or more struggling than the difference of time and the way it's valued. As a good German Canadian, I know that every minute matters and every second is 1 second too many if it's late. I grew up with the saying, if you're 5 minutes early, you're on time. And at our church, that is not the case. It is often more likely that somebody will show up 15 minutes late or with no concept of time whatsoever. Church, when we begin, starts off with about a dozen of us, and by the time it ends, there's 50 or 60 of us. And I can't really tell you when everybody comes in. Sometimes some people come in at 12, which is just a strange thing that happens. But it has taught us some important things about time. Over the course of the last 10 years, we've learned that sometimes Westerners put too much care into time. We worry too much about how many minutes everything takes. As long as we forget that when we get together to do something, that's the thing that's important. So as a church, what we've tried to come to is to say we have a purpose when we meet together, whether it's a board meeting or a church service or whatever it is we're doing. We intend to accomplish this task. and it might take a little bit longer or start a little bit later than we expect. That said, we tend to say our meetings start 30 minutes before they do, so that the people who are maybe not great at time or like to spend a little bit of extra time visiting can come a little bit early. And we ask about our families and about what's going on in life. We do all the chit chat in the first little bit to allow people who are maybe running a little bit later to show up so that we can start a meeting on time. And if you're a person who's rigidly committed to time, you know you should actually come about 20 minutes later than the announced time, and you'll be right on time. This has taught us a lot of interesting and valuable things just about who we are and how we work together. But a couple good stories that the task force had asked me to share to give you an insight of the value of different culture and why I've come to love it so much. Is that when we pass the peace at church, when we get up to you spin a little circle and shake each other's hands, ours is like 15, maybe even 20 minutes at times, and people get out of their pews. They go and hug each other. They ask each other how they're doing. There's sometimes snacks for kids. It is a riotous experience that is very off-putting for newcomers. And I try to warn them when they come that this is maybe one of the biggest differences about our church, is that the value of the individual, the greeting a person and caring for that person and making sure they're seen and known far exceeds decorum, worrying about touching someone, or about the time we have to do it. It has taught us to be a little more lax about time, a little more relaxed about how we use our time, but also to care about each other more. Just think about who's in the room, that they're recognized, that they're known, that they're seen, and that they're loved. I wouldn't change it for anything now, but it did take a little bit of getting used to. I think it is an incredibly valuable gift that we've been given and an incredibly valuable thing we have as a church. So there's a little bit about us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Dustin and Crestview Park FMC, for your example. And thank you to all the respondents in our surveys and our forums, etc., for sharing your heart and being willing to work with us. So one of the takeaways from Pastor Dustin's sharing with us here is, how do we see each other? How do we make eye contact and maybe touch one on the shoulder and let them know from whatever background that they're seen? So let's go a little bit further. Who are your closest friends from other cultures? Have you explored their values that are different from yours? If you don't have any close friends from other cultures, this is a great opportunity. You can try exploring, try exploring the beginnings of our closer friendship here at General Conference and take it back home and continue to make connection over the coming year. We propose recommendation number 4 to facilitate exposure to and understanding of different values. Essentially, we are recommending that ministerial candidates be given the opportunity to engage and serve, and I'll add, make friends in a variety of Canadian ministry settings, get exposed to different cultures, different ethnicities. What you can also do while you're here at General Conference is consider exploring the workshops, as has been mentioned before, from the Pathway for Deeper Relational and Missional Health series tomorrow afternoon with Jervis, Darren, and Paula. Now, my closing reminder, as the RG team would like to remind us all, souvenez-vous toujours du Québec. Always remember Quebec.
Just before I invite David to come to give a report from the History Subcommittee, I'd like you to consider this idea that the background of church planters and their teams who launched FMCIC churches that have formed the current experience of our local and national movement, I think about my own church. I think about Kingsview, and we just celebrated 60 years of God's faithfulness last year in 2023. We were a church plant, and it gives me pause to reflect on what is the legacy and what are those things that continue to have an impact. How does the dominant group who planted and worked hard and gave tracts out and invited people in the neighborhood to come and form our church family, how is that still impacting us today? There's many good things, and there's other things that we need to consider. So get your phones ready for Kahoot. We're going to go to the next question. This is a multiple choice question. And it is this: where do FMCIC minority leaders face challenges due to these kinds of historical legacies and relationships? And by historical legacies and relationships, we're referring to the environment, the relationships, the culture that grew out of the influence of the first church planters in a church family, the early congregants of a congregation that's had that lasting impact on the church. What do you think? Inclusion, representation, recognition of experience, recognition of education. Wow. Inclusion is the leader, followed closely by recognition of experience and representation, and recognition of education a little bit before or a little bit after that. That's great insight. You're a really sharp group. I'm not saying that as a surprise. That's an affirmation. Okay, you're a really sharp group. And I'm going to invite David, before I say anything else, I'm going to invite David to come on up and give the history presentation. Thank you.
Kusha Kusheu, Wana Kabo. That's how I would greet fellow believers in Christ back home in Sierra Leone. I just spoke Creole, and I'm saying welcome to the beautiful city of Brampton. I know that quite a number of you have come from different locations to attend this conference. And I have a very interesting question which Darren has posed, and I'll do my best, following the script, to answer the question. So thank you, Pastor Darren, for the question, and I think it was a great question. The vision of the Free Methodist Church in Canada is to see a healthy church within the reach of all people in Canada and beyond. What does a healthy church look like? That's a question which we need to ponder. We know that Christ commissioned us to share the gospel with a diverse world. See Matthew 28:19. The word go suggests that we must get within reach, learn to be in close proximity with each other. So it is a wonderful ideal to have FMCIC churches within the reach of all people in Canada. That is all of us. The text says to make disciples of all the nations. As disciples mature in Christ, we learn from and teach each other as the Spirit deploys gifts for our mutual edification. So does not our vision also require churches to be receptive to diverse peoples across Canada as they respond to God's Spirit? We see in Revelations 21:24-26 that the Church Universal, in its diversity, brings the glory of the nations into the New Jerusalem. We see that, I quote, "The kings of the earth will bring the glory and honor of the nations into it," end quote. This is a picture of health in the body of Christ. This is restoration of relationship, true shalom among peoples. All nations are contributing, All nations are bringing glory into the city. All are included, represented, and recognized. Yes, we see the future God paints of a beautiful intercultural diversity. But does his desire for filial harmony across diverse cultural boundaries burn in our hearts? Does it move us to deeper fellowship with others that don't look like us? We see that the angst of some of the respondents in the Bramalea Free Methodist case study who asked, why is it that even today, people of God who are called to love everyone have not learned to be enriched by our differences? In one survey on the topic of diversity and inclusion and its importance in the denomination, answers varied. The perception that it has not been important to the denomination was voiced. That's a quote. Some noted that diversity and inclusion efforts have been largely aspirational, with room to grow. Respondents identified the need for greater intentionality. Another said, I quote, "We fell behind in implementation. We wonder where is the sense of holy compulsion, an inner fire of fierce love, the Spirit's passion to love everyone through us as Jesus loves?" For many churches, today's demographics are quite different from the demographics of the church's planters and their early congregants. Your church developed a formula which helped it to operate successfully. That became the status quo. Prayerfully examine whether some aspects of your church's legacy, its historical formula and culture, must be superseded if you are to follow Jesus as he leads towards his vision. This status quo shows up in leadership traditions. Families become known for the leadership role they played in the formative years of a congregation. An expectation develops around those families. We continue to look to them and their circles of leadership over generations. Doesn't God desire to raise leaders up from other circles as well? How open are we to his working through all tribes? Our research on the historical experiences of indigenous leaders identified two early significant barriers. One, resistance to accepting or even exploring indigenous cultures and worldviews. And secondly, lack of support for indigenous leaders. Then in 2008, the FMCIC First Nations sub-team adopted the following resolution. I quote, "Be it resolved that we hereby publicly confess a role in the historical oppression of our First Nations people, even if that role was only passive inaction." End quote. Fast forward to today, we benefit from the efforts of the intercultural engagement team as they lead us in learning much more about our indigenous neighbors, reaching out to engage and then respond in meaningful ways. May we see the day when many indigenous believers thrive as leaders in our circles. Our conviction is that we must learn to better understand and appreciate the positive impact of a diversified leadership base that brings glory from all nations into the FMCIC and grows together. Having said that, we have two recommendations which I'm going to read. Therefore, we propose these two recommendations. Recommendation number 5, commit to identifying and minimizing barriers to accessing scholarships and financial aid to internationally developed leaders from all people groups. Recommendation number 9, conduct further research into the immigrant experience as it pertains to faith, church leadership, the passing on of faith through generations, and the role of immigrants in the future of the Canadian church. Finally, as our team likes to say, always remember Quebec. Thank you for listening.
We come to our final section. Thanks for hanging in there with us. We're also coming to our last Kahoot question. I know, right? We didn't have enough, but we want to focus as much on the content as the experience. So, Lisa, if you can go to the next, we're going to see the results. Here's the scoreboard. A Pearl, I know who that is has a tenuous lead. Okay, so this is the last question. This is your opportunity to leap ahead. The clicker clicked. Here we go. True or false? Do you believe the following statement? The level of intercultural engagement of leaders has a significant impact on congregants. The leader's level of comfort with diversity and intercultural engagement guides the congregation's level of comfort. True or false? I could resonate with Pastor Dustin and his experience at Crestview. Sounded very similar to our experience at Kingsview. And I'll take it even one step further, where I'm the token white guy in my own house. And so I find this statement to be quite true. And 80 out of 84 people agree, and I'm glad that you agree. Those 4, we would love to chat. And once again, just, you know, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. We're exploring these things together. So thanks. Can we go to the podium just quickly on the click next? And here we go. This is the big finale. Whoa, Padre K squeaks into number 3. The clicker at number 2, and I'm guessing A Pearl. A Pearl, congratulations. I'd like to extend from our generous RG budget your prizes of knowing that you did a great job. Okay? Congratulations. And now, I'd like to respond to this question from our report. That one of the statements we made in this report, among the 99 or so pages, is that pastoral passion for diversity and the willingness to be uncomfortable sometimes. For example, in stepping out in front to facilitate and participate in difficult conversations and interactions was seen among the respondents as a signal of the depth of a church's engagement in intercultural relationships within the context of the local church. I don't know how many conversations about time that I have had with people. It continues. And so we're totally ignoring time in our presentation this morning. And you may be wondering, when is this thing going to end? And to Pastor Dustin's point, it's going to end when we've accomplished our purpose. All right. Thanks for bearing with us. Those who are really strict on the clock, my apologies. Some pastors are thinking about this. You're thinking about this, other leaders in your reality, the validity of yours and others' experiences. Maybe you're considering your own self-awareness. Maybe you're considering being teachable. Fantastic. Some are fostering curiosity within themselves, and we see that across our denomination. And again, as Pastor Sabrina noted, you've got some awesome opportunities this weekend to make new connections. It's a strong value within our movement, and we encourage that. Some pastors interviewed made a point of being personally curious, not just theoretically curious, about the differences in other cultures, including body language and ways of speaking, languages, and ways of worshiping. More so, they appreciate and sometimes personally embrace those differences. Did you like Pastor Dustin's shirt? Did you see that? That was pretty nice. That's not from Germany. These are hopefully, I have German background as well, so I feel confident in saying that. These are hopeful stories of pastors and pastoral passion for diversity and a willingness to be uncomfortable, because that's part of what's required. Congregants respond to the leadership influence of us as pastors and other leaders. The passion and effort to foster diversity within a congregation was noted to be related in part to the influence of the leader's own background. The exposure and experience, especially in peer groups or in their curiosity and interest to other cultures. A passionate lay leader described her own family's heritage of reaching out to others of diverse backgrounds, and she noted that a cornerstone of her grandfather's ministry was local visitation and outreach that extended to its ministry in Haiti. So it's local and it's global. Her grandmother's family worked in a war-torn African nation as well. Another pastor who was a major influence in the early development of her church worked fervently on missions. And here's the quote: "Their focus was so much on mission, global as well as local, and it just kind of carried on throughout the church." Amen. One church had a more recent history of engaging with challenges of deliberately embracing diversity. And it had seen its leadership tackle racist rhetoric head on. A couple apparently felt comfortable disparaging a refugee family that the church was sponsoring to the leader. This comfort level was, let's say, misplaced. And as the pastor pointedly reminded the church member that their church family sponsored and supported ethnic and cultural diversity, and that it was important for them to examine, was that a good fit for them? That's a tough conversation. But this response, I think, and others, speak to the importance of intercultural competence. The Intercultural Development Continuum is a developmental model made up of 5 orientations toward cultural differences and similarities. It's a cultural general model. What does that mean? That means that it can be applied to any cultural group. And as individuals and groups move along this continuum, maybe you've heard of this or been part of this training, as you move along the continuum, capacity to experience cultural similarities and differences with more complexity increases. There's always more to explore. The Intercultural Development Inventory, or the IDI, assesses individuals and groups' mindset towards cultural differences and similarities. I know many of you have taken this inventory. And some recently. I was really encouraged to know that recently the regional coaches went through the assessment process. Thanks to Dan and Jervis for leading us in that direction. And again, there is this substantial historical group who have gone through this, pastors, lay leaders, and others, and found it to be helpful. I found it to be very insightful. I thought I was so interculturally competent when I took this, and I found out, and Dan gently let me down, that I had a lot more to learn. And I've continued to do that. Thanks, Dan, for your openness. I'm sure as I would be, that they would be glad to talk to you about this experience. It's painless, maybe a little humbling, but it's painless. We hope that this tool is adopted more widely among national leaders, among pastors and lay leaders, and into our churches for that matter, in our movement. And just one final note about the IDI, and this is a quote. Two separate interviewees in our process noted that the former director of Global and Intercultural Ministries, Dan Sheffield, current lead pastor of Grapeview Church, has been invaluable to intercultural competency in our movement. But it hasn't always been, this is a direct quote, it hasn't always had willing participants. And that in his absence, some of this information has aged a little bit. So we propose this final recommendation, which is number 3, to help combat racism and encourage integration of diverse ethnicities within our congregations and among our leadership, create and provide educational resources that offer an understanding of diversity as God designed, as a beautiful picture of God's kingdom. And the IDI can just be part of that, and there's more. The one thing that we all agreed on, so as we hear those survey responses, all of you who responded to the survey, thank you. We agreed on only one question in the survey, but I'm glad that it was this one, that we all know we need to learn more. And so bless you in that. Not only as we do that individually, we do it personally, but we do it together. We do it corporately as a movement. So thank you for your attention as we have presented 4 years of hard work. It was a colossal undertaking. I'm pretty sure David used the word colossal after he finished reading our 99-page report. But I'm going to invite David to come back up and just summarize. And as he comes, I am not going to punish you with my terrible French because, of course, it's being translated. Everyone together now, you can say it in English or in French. Always remember Quebec. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you to the RG panel for the creative but informative presentation. And so a lot of things to learn and a lot of things that we've appreciated learning and gaining a better understanding in this. So I just wanted to wrap up by mentioning that the BOA has a path forward, as you see on the screen here. So we did, when we received the final report, it's been mentioned a few times already that it was rather lengthy, but we took the time to work our way through it, and we did consider each of the recommendations, spent some time deliberating them and talking about them, what we could do. And we really felt that one of the best things we could do to start off would be to transition the task force into an actual team, that is an RG team. And so the team would ensure some ongoing work in this regard. The team has not been assembled yet, but we would draw from the advice, perhaps the participation from the current task force members to help us assemble that. And of course, we will also be working closely with the national leadership team, our new bishop, as well as the intercultural engagement team, and then the BOA. So we're working together to kind of assemble this team and to lay out what it would look like and what it would be doing. The idea overall would be to develop actual implementation strategies based on the task force recommendations as we move forward. We do understand that this would be a large undertaking. Some of the recommendations are more challenging than others. And so it's quite likely that this will take some time, but we do commit to moving this ahead in this fashion. And of course, the ultimate goal would be to help our FMCIC and our local churches to, in the words of the task force itself, to
lunch. But before we get there, have 3 announcements and we have an activity. So the 3 announcements are, 1, if you have been invited to the Women in Leadership luncheon hosted by our bishop-elect, then if you would want to remind you of that and make your way to the Quebec room after getting lunch. If you are a spouse of a pastor, then you have an activity as well. And we would encourage women in leadership and the spouse of pastors to get their lunch first. So if you're not in those categories, let those people go ahead. Be Christian, be kind, right? We do want to thank Our Daily Bread Ministries for sponsoring today's lunch, and we appreciate that a lot. Now I'm going to invite Steve, and he's going to give us some direction for a group photo.
Thanks, Brent. Hi there, yes, I'm Steve. That's all you get to know about me. I float around and help support. I'm part of the supporting cast here. Want to introduce you to Cameron, who's making his way up here. He's our photographer, so if you see him fluttering around, he's allowed. Anyone else taking pictures, not allowed. So you can just tap them on the shoulder and tell them to get out of there. So I've thought about this, and this is tricky. I think what we're going to do is 3 steps. One of them is stand. 2 is move your seat as far back to the table behind you as possible. And 3 is the wings need to come in, and that's the trickiest part. Feel free to fill in these middle zones as well. So we're really way too wide for a group photo, and we need to condense into the middle. This is going to take everyone's understanding, but let's be Christian. Let's get tight, get close, be the body, all these messages you've been hearing, and we're going to do our very best to get absolutely everyone in this photo. If there's people in the hallway, maybe someone just holler and say group photo time, come on in. If you have a coat covering your shirt, take your coat off so we can see the shirts. This is a shirt photo op as well. And then Cameron, come on to the middle and let me know. So stand, seats to the back, and then bring it into the middle so that we're nice and tight.